Hey, everybody, that was the divine, the wonderful, the thrilling Dar Williams singing the Solartopia song with the amazing Pete Seeger and David Burns, who wrote the words to that song, except for one, Solartopia. I am Harvey Sluggo Wasserman, back for another hour, gratefully, at the Progressive Radio Network with the Green Power and Wellness Show. We have a very powerful lineup today, a lot to talk about. We got the wonderful Mimi Kennedy, Mark KARLIN from BuzzFlash, Joel Siegel in North Carolina with his tar hat on. Is that Tar Heels or Tar Head? I can never.
Tar Heels. Tar Heels.
Okay. And we're going to be joined by Bob FITRAKIS, my co-conspirator from Columbus, Ohio, and John BRAKEY, the magnificent election protection guru, suing the state of Florida for protection of the digital images. Mark Carter, we're going to start with you. This pandemic just gets scarier and scarier. And I got to say that I have a child who's a teacher in the New York City public school system, and we see that Trump is strong-arming all these schools to reopen. I mean, is he trying to exterminate our children? What's going on here?
He's a sociopath. He's said as much in the excerpts from her memoir that have just come out, Nancy Trump's book, that he's a sociopath and that his father actually valued not just being a winner, but being a killer, quote unquote. I don't think Fred Trump meant that literally, but I think Donald Trump means that literally. And he's killing tens of thousands. We may end up with millions of Americans. Our coronavirus confirmed infection rate has reached over 50,000 nationally a day. That's confirmed. Many epidemiologists, in fact, the CDC last week said that there are probably 10 times that number of people who are infected, but they're asymptomatic. So if we're reaching 55, 60,000 a day, Fauci says it may go up to 100. If it's 100,000, that means 1 million approximately are being infected a day. But only a small portion are actually tested because they're showing serious symptoms.
Well, I am seriously terrified. I mean, you have to remember in 1918, 675,000 Americans died from the influenza, the Spanish influenza, in a country that was a third the population of the United States. So if you extrapolate that out, we're talking about 2 million deaths.
Also, it was nowhere near as medically sophisticated. Donald Trump could have stopped this pretty much and really limited the loss of death to maybe a few thousand. But he didn't want to do that. For some reason, he wanted the coronavirus to actually rage through the United States, which it is doing. I don't know if we're past the tipping point, but we're about to go there. And as usual, he's doubling down on that. As you mentioned, Harvey, he's now insisting, although he doesn't have the authority to open public schools, but he's insisting, and he said he's going to put the weight of his office on governors to open schools in the fall. The problem with this is he's flat out wrong in saying this won't add to infection. First of all, you have adults who teach, who are on the administrative staff, the janitorial staff, and so forth. But second of all, I have an article up on BuzzFlash from CNN that says over 1,000 of the infections in Texas are from daycare centers, and that 400 to 500 of those infections are among the children. So you can only see that exponentially increasing to tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if Donald Trump is able to strong-arm states, and it will most likely be the red states. Florida, I think DeSantis, who's sort of a forever Trumpster, has already agreed to, put out a proclamation that the governor Florida says open the public schools in the fall. This is a disaster. He wants the power over life and death, and we're allowing him to get away with it. And I don't think the country is as alarmed as you and I are. It's a big, big story on BuzzFlash, and it is appalling that the Democrats, let alone the Republicans, are not pulling a four-alarm fire. Trump should be removed from office. I know he can't be impeached, but I think there should be enough public pressure that he has no other choice.
Mimi Kennedy, you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, the appalling thing, there's so much, but I can't understand why it isn't simply noticeable to people who have made a simple political equation all along about the right to life. Being a Catholic, I am very aware of just how adamant it makes anybody who believes that life begins at conception Republican, because they say it's the only way to preserve those lives, and I must, or I will go to hell when I die. I have understood the strength of that adamance, and now we have before us a president who purports to be a right-to-lifer, a Republican, sympathetic to this Catholic view, and yet it's very clear what he's doing, and I'm going to bring this to elections in a minute. But remember natural law, how that helped Clarence Thomas and others discern what to do? There's a natural law. Well, we see in Florida, this woman who took a 17-year-old child of hers, immunocompromised, to the church picnic, because if God wanted her to die, she'd die. Otherwise, if her faith was strong, she'd live. Same thing a Texas pastor is quoted as saying in the New York Times this morning. I need to open my church. I'm sorry if some people die, but if God wants me to get COVID, I'll get COVID. If God doesn't, I won't. So this is magical thinking, and it is denying life to the weakest of us and the elderly in terms of sending children to school. The strong will survive. Darwinian. If they're asymptomatic and they take it home and their grandparents die, well, that's 2 less on Social Security. They were weak anyway. They were old. This is the thinking of genocidal maniacs. And Trump, because of this book, we're going to find out it's Mary Trump. I love her name because I'm a Mary. And Mary's the mother of God, and she's at work in the world. But Mary has said he numbed his feelings, so he can't respond to humans the same way. But he has embraced the ideology of babies and making women have babies because life is so beautiful and God loves it or kills it. Not my fault. God loves, God kills. And it is completely, yes, 25th Amendment. This man's unfit to be president, but we've got all these believers who go, I love it that a religious man's in the White House. Now let me bring it to elections. There is, among the Democrats as well as the lily-livered Republicans, well, let the people take care of it. We can't remove a person that the people voted for. Let's see what the people vote for. Well, that'd be dandy if we had real elections, but we've got the Electoral College, we've got congressional level county cheating going on, and they can get a president or a compliant Senate in there anytime they want for those judges. So that's what's happened. The right to life has turned into a suicidal, homicidal maniac in the White House who's letting this cull the herd. And people are going, yes, God will provide. And we humans have no agency, no political agency, no moral agency under their purview. And so we're on an elections call, and this is the friggin' most important work that I can think of to be doing, because I am so angry about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi. It's always great to have a Catholic on the show.
Named Mary. Named Mary,
for God's sakes. Joel Siegel, you had your hand up.
Well, what Mimi just said, I thought was riveting. That was incredible, Mimi, what you just said, and Mark. I'll just make 3 points. The first point would be, given that literally tens of thousands of people are dying needlessly because the Trump administration has no national plan for testing, contact tracing, treating, and we know that Black and brown people are dying at disproportionate rates, both in terms of infections and death. I'm not going to use the word ethnic cleansing, but it's kind of close.
Go ahead. Why not?
I mean, it's pretty close. And if I was a lawyer working at the core of The Hague, I would put. Now, people might think, well, I'm going to say it's controversial. I really mean what I'm saying. I think he should be put up in the, for war crimes against the people at the core of The Hague. I really do think these are war crimes. When the governors have said, we can't get the PPEs, we don't have enough beds, and Trump says, too bad, I think that is a war crime. I think it's really important to use these kind of, this language, war crime. The second point that I want to make is, what Mimi said, I can't second that enough. And that's, we have 4 months to throw Bozo the Clown out, because our national strategy will be contingent upon 2 things: a president that has a national strategy for COVID and a Congress that is supportive, which means we got to get, McConnell out. And the lies that Trump says over and over again, he goes on TV and he says, we've done more testing, than any other country in the world. I mean, thank you, Heinrich Himmler. Thank you, Goebbels. So that's what he sounds like. And between his, the pathological lying, between the sheer incompetence of the administration, as someone who's worked with 3 presidents, Democrat, Republican, I just can't believe what I'm seeing, but it is resulting in massive unnecessary deaths.
There's no doubt about it. And they do serve a political purpose. They're disrupting the election. I do have a piece up that our reader-supported news that supports our voting in stadiums. Bob FITRAKIS and I are working on that in Central Ohio to see the state of Ohio, the legislature, the extreme right-wing legislature, has said by law now that every county in the state, all 88 of them, can have only one place to vote. And if that's the case, they should be in the hockey and basketball arenas where people can congregate. They don't have to stand in line, take a number, go in, flash your number on the scoreboard when they're ready for you. Restrooms out of the elements, ban guns for God's sakes. This is something that could work. And in Columbus, the arena, the hockey arena, the big arena, is owned by the county. Bob, what do you think? You think we're going to be able to win that one in Columbus?
Well, I talked to County Commissioner Kevin Boyce's staff person, and she said she was going to look at the possibilities.
Yeah, right.
And get back to me. So right now they're just working out whether there's going to be a hockey season. It looks like a go. So again, the arena is paid for by tax money from casino gambling. And again, as we pointed out in the article, it's centrally located. You can have people socially distanced there. There's food available, and it would be a great symbol that it's owned by the people here in Franklin County.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where it should be. We got to thank the Atlanta Hawks. The team in Atlanta volunteered their arena for voting. It's a brilliant step forward. My article about it is at Reader-Supported News. It'll be at BuzzFlash tomorrow. And Bob, your piece on Columbus itself is at freepress.org. So people take a look. I hope that our voting is, we don't want people standing outside anymore, certainly not in November, certainly not with the virus just going everywhere. At least in the arena, they can be spaced and they can wear masks and go to the bathroom and not be harassed by the Ku Klux Klan. Before we jump back into election stuff.
That right-wing groups have announced a huge rally in Ohio to get the state to support the police and for open carry in Ohio. So a lot of the militia groups on the far right are coming out for a huge rally in the Capitol.
When is that?
I believe it's July 18th.
Oh, okay. Are you going to be a featured speaker? Sorry. Anyway, Bob and
I can get you some data on it.
Before we jump back in, we have to have a little comic relief. And I know once we get into the election issues, we're going to not do this. So I got to tell you, I was born in Boston. We moved to Columbus, Ohio when I was 2 in 1947. When I was about 7 or 8, one of the big events in town, and Columbus was such a backwater town. I mean, it was just really, like living in a vacuum, for God's sakes. In the early 50s, somewhere in the 50s, the big event was they brought in the biggest statue in the world of Christopher Columbus, and they put it in front of the city hall. And this was all a big deal, and we'd go down to see the Chris Columbus statue and all that. And this is before we got political consciousness. So then I came back to Columbus, and there's a great active Native American community there. And in 1992, at the 500th anniversary of the coming of Columbus, we had a great rally. One of the best rallies I've ever been to. It was a third people of color, a third indigenous, and a third white hippies. It was so much fun. And it was on the front page of USA Today. And then they brought in a replica of the Santa Maria. And Bob used to lead the charge down to the Santa Maria, down on the river. I'll never forget Bob going belly to belly with a couple of the cops. It was fantastic.
Well, wasn't that chest to chest?
Oh, chest to chest. Well,
You're being a little accurate.
You were young.
Actually right. I think it was belly to belly.
Well, you were younger then, so it was chest to chest. Now it's belly to belly. So anyway, last week, and then they put a statue of Columbus at Columbus State Community College. So within a mile of each other in downtown Columbus, you had not one but 2 statues of Christopher Columbus. And Bob, tell them what happened last week.
Well, last week, both of them were removed at City Council and at Columbus State. And literally, when they took down the one at Columbus State, they took the head off first. Students had been throwing red paint at it, and then they wrapped it in plastic. And it looked like a very sadly dismembered conquistador, not only who had been strangled and then had his head chopped off by the mafia.
Can I ask a completely politically incorrect question? But since I have historians here, Christopher Columbus was, in my childhood, an idol of the Italian-American community.
That's right, he was.
And they were the second biggest in our parochial school to the Irish-American community. So there were lots of verbal jousts between who was better, St. Patrick or St. Joseph, Christopher Columbus. So I'm sitting here thinking, where'd the name Columbus come from? He got out of Spain, thanks to Queen Isabella. Right. I know there's a lot of Iberian Peninsula. That's what happened to my Italian blood in 23andMe, Iberian Peninsula. Christopher Columbus is...
Yeah, who knows?
It's
Cologne.
It's really interesting because Americans, we love the name Columbus, and it sounds so middle, and I'm just wondering, Christopher
I always hated the name.
Columbus?
I hated the name.
I thought he was from Korčula, which would actually make him Croatian. Those lands go back and forth. So when I was in the former Yugoslavia studying worker self-management, all the people in Croatia who were very right-wing told me Columbus was theirs.
Okay. Well, I just find this stuff interesting because as a storyteller, it'd be really helpful to know the true stories and calm everybody down so that we're not taking away their culture.
Well, he was a truly horrible guy. He came here 4 times, and he after the 3rd visit, the Spaniards actually arrested him for cruelty to the indigenous. I mean, you really got to go a long way to get arrested by the Spanish for cruelty to the indigenous. He was just terrible.
And, a lot of that is captured right in Lacosse's journal. The Catholic priest who went along recorded all of it. And the thing he objected to is when Columbus landed the first time, he crucified 13 people in honor of the Savior and the apostles. And he
Oh my God.
What a lovely gesture.
So I knew that sitting here with historians, I get something that was.
Well, you'll like this being in Los Angeles. Bernardo de las Casas was the priest who documented what Columbus did. And he came back and he got to the king, Philip, who was no great shakes, to demand that the Spanish, in the Catholic tradition of mercy, do better by the Indians. Yeah. And he was opposed in a legal proceeding by a guy named, you'll love this, Mimi, living in West Los Angeles. The guy's name was Sepulveda. And Sepulveda was the lawyer arguing against being decent to the Indians.
Oh my God.
And the king saw in favor of Sepulveda and gave him half of what's now Los Angeles. And that's why the street Sepulveda goes all the way up and down the west side of LA, because this guy was a war criminal.
Pico and Sepulveda.
Yeah, right. So there you go. Wow. So I have to say, I cannot be more thrilled than to know that these two statues of Christopher Columbus in my former hometown of Columbus, Ohio, are gone. They're gone. Wow. And Bob, did you find out the name? There's a town in Columbus, in Ohio. Tell us this.
Well, there was a reference on the cable news spectrum that there's one small town in Ohio that has volunteered to be like a refugee camp for all the displaced statues. That regardless, they can all come there and they see it as a tourist attraction. So if you got some leftover,
yeah, sure, I'm all for that.
I think it's a great idea.
But yeah.
All right, and then because we have an environmental aspect to this program, I am advocating now. You know, there's going to be all this debate. You take down all these statues, who's going to go back up? Right. I say we pulverize all the sites where the statues are and plant trees. Like the Jefferson. Can you imagine? We take Thomas Jefferson out of the memorial in Washington. We cut a hole in the roof and we plant a tree. Wow. In front of the city hall in Columbus, we should have a Buckeye tree. You know, Bob has suggested planting marijuana, but it would disappear like overnight.
I was going to say, I hope the trees will last till they grow.
You'll never keep it. I would argue for a maple tree because then
the Indian hemp seed everywhere, Harvey. You know the saying.
Well, George Washington imported hemp seed from India, for God's sake. So, you know, the big one now, they're going to go after Washington and Jefferson. There was a mistake made, although I think the right wing did it. Somebody took down U.S. Grant, and he did own slaves briefly in his life, but no president has ever fought harder for the rights of Black people than U.S. Grant did in prosecuting Reconstruction. And
except perhaps William Tecumseh Sherman, who has a plaque over in Franklin Park where I walk every day. Oh, right? Really? That's where he said, "War, it's all hell."
Yes, and in front of the State House in Columbus, we have 7 presidents, including Grant, but the rest of them all were ridiculous. Yeah. Anyway, so I just want to celebrate that. Christopher Columbus is gone from Columbus, and we now have to rename the town.
This is going to take a while. There were people predicting the end of history some time ago.
Yeah,
we have to do online digital. But here's the thing. Many institutions that have formed us were formed on forgeries, on election frauds. There's a lot to go back and unravel. The important thing is who's alive now, like communities of color, who are suffering because these myths are embraced and used to justify hatred and superiority. That's the important thing that we got to keep before us. If these myths are making us feel superior and making other people suffer, this is America, and we have equality in all those things those founding fathers, however flawed they were, instituted. it's up to us to improve them, not to worship the past and allow them their mistakes. So the tearing down of the statues, I get it. And I think that we should go forward doing all this kind of revision that we can. But the most important thing is not the statues, it's the people now alive.
Exactly. Yes. And so let's talk about that. But like I say, my advocacy, we vote in arenas, stadiums, and where the statues are torn down, we plant trees. There's a two-pronged struggle. Now, the third one, and we're going to get to John Brakey on this, is the trifecta, the election protection trifecta. Number one, we protect the voter registration rolls. Number two, we vote by mail. And number three, which is John Brakey's expertise, having just filed an epic lawsuit, we guarantee the digital imaging on the ballots. We guarantee the vote count. So, John, tell us on this call about the lawsuit that you have filed in Florida, which I am 100% sure will go to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Well, first off, well said. You know, I mean, the first subject of this whole thing is this American exceptionalism and why we're so special. We should know our history, and America is learning that history, and that's very important. And part of that history is elections, and this trifecta thing you're talking about is right on, okay? And the part that I work on very hard, but I teach the other two, is that we need elections that are transparent, trackable, publicly verified, and we know how to do it, and the system is in place. Very few people know about it. The lawsuit in Florida is kind of ridiculous lawsuit. I want you to know that. And what's ridiculous is that we're saying the world is round and a digital scanner creates an image, and that's a fact. The other side says the world is flat and we didn't turn that thing on. We say it doesn't work unless you turn it on. That's their defense, is they didn't turn it on, and because they didn't turn it on, it didn't create an image. And that is just a dream that they have.
Well, tell us exactly.
That boils down the fight. Go ahead.
So you were talking about, let's presume that we have on election in the fall, in the multi-day elections, let's presume that we have protected the voter rolls, the registration rolls, and millions of people who are entitled to vote actually get to vote. And in many cases, they get ballots in the mail if we still have a post office. And, you know, we may be in the position of hand delivering ballots to voters. Let's presume that the ballots have come back in. Now, what you have said is that in 80% of the precincts in this country, there are electronic digital scanning machines, and that the paper ballots can be put into the machine, and electronic image, digital image is created. The paper ballot itself goes into a bin on the other side, so we still have it. And then the election can be counted in less than 10 seconds. And what around the country, despite the presence of these machines in 80% of the precincts, election officials are destroying the electronic ballot images and even saying that they don't exist. And you are suing to demand that they do preserve the election, the ballot images, and that they count them, right?
Yeah, we want them to do something really incredible. We want them to follow the law.
Yeah.
When does a public record become a public record? The millisecond was used. Federal law, if it's generated in the chain of custody, it must be preserved. Secondly,
okay, that's fine.
There are two official ballots now, the one that you filled out and the one the machine counted. This is all common sense. This is all law. This is common law of contracts and how things are handled, and it's very plain. And I think the first judge I took this case to in 2016 at Pima County said it perfect. He says, you know, I'm not computer literate, but if you take voted ballots and you photocopy them and you use the photocopies, what makes you think you can destroy this stuff? I rule for BRAKEY right from the bench. It happened in Montgomery, Alabama. just before Mimi prayed the rosary and got her wish. The judge ruled our way. Remember Mimi? That was an incredible case. And state after state. And they still insist on destroying this stuff. And they destroy it, as Bill Reisner would say, and Bill is a dear friend, is that maybe somebody's protecting the right to cheat now or in some future election. Those ballot images are impunity busters. We want them to put the inkjet back into the machine to marry the ballot to the image.
Yeah.
This is how we can have elections that we can trust. Because what ultimately is going to destroy our country is cynicism. And it's a sad state of affair. In 2016, if not voting was a presidential candidate, they would have won by a landslide. 107 million people didn't vote. Well, what did Hillary get? 68 million? What did Trump get? 64, 65 million? Hey, there was a guy in 1932 from Germany. He did better. He got a 34% turnout.
Right.
We need elections that we can believe in and that we can assure the American people that voting makes a difference. And the only way we can do that is doing what Ronald Reagan said. Hey, I'm going to call out a Republican on this one. He said what? Vote. He said, trust but verify. I believe no verify, no trust. And we must challenge these people to preserve these things. Educate candidates. If they want my vote, assure me that my vote really counts. Challenge the election. Prove to me. We run elections in this country. Most election directors, when I go in there, I ask them, how do you know your election is good? Oh, I ran a logic and accuracy test. That only proves it's working right at this moment. It's an important procedure. That's all it is. We got to get the American people and candidates educated to help us make sure they're following the law.
Mimi?
Amen. I've forgotten that I talked about praying when you were in that lawsuit, but it's occurring to me. John, when do you expect this to be adjudicated?
In the next 30 days or less. Their primary is the 18th.
Okay.
And that'll give them time to recall all their memory cards, reset them up, and then just turn one switch on. Save.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay? Because we know when they say save none, you know what that means? Permission to destroy.
Absolutely.
To save only the write-ins, it means destroy everything else.
Yeah.
This is an Orwellian attempt, and I'll say this. I'm calling out ES&S, okay? Yep. They count 51% of the vote in this election, and me and other people who have studied them have now asked for a congressional investigation, okay? And for their business practices. And you know what's really vindictive of their attitude?
What?
Really blows my mind? Their building is on a street called John Galt Boulevard. Anybody know that name?
No.
What? My God, that's on Fountainhead, the book by Ayn Rand.
Oh, right. That's where I've heard it before.
Yeah,
right.
A friend made me read that when I was
it's a short street. And by the way, it bumps into Q Street. How about that for a conspiracy we could start spreading?
Yeah.
Well,
I know, right? And Ronald Reagan was going to live at 666 St. Cloud Drive or whatever.
Right, and the Kushner's building in downtown.
I'm starting that conspiracy.
Well, Kushner's building in downtown Manhattan is 666 also.
As a storyteller, yes, one does note those things. What I wanted to ask, John, is after it's adjudicated there and you win, do you expect an appeal? And was that the one that would go to the Supremes?
I do, but by that time, I'll be in other states because I'm going to be Johnny Appleseed of making sure that elections are transparent, trackable, and publicly verified.
So regardless,
vote by mail can be released by batches. I mean, we can do a lot to prove that elections are real because it will be a slow count.
In the meantime, even if it's in Florida, if it's appealed, you can then go and get state rulings from other courts. It'll go to a district court, won't it, from Florida?
Well, no, it's going to stay in state court, and then after we win all through the state, they might take it federal. But this is a state issue in Florida. Now, it could wind up in the feds, let's face it. I mean, it's happened before.
Oh, I guarantee
we're looking to go into other states, and my focus right now is Michigan, North Carolina. I got a call later tomorrow with people in Philadelphia. talk about Pennsylvania. And by the way, if it's a massive vote by mail effort in this country, it won't be 80% of the machines will be counting. It will be 97% of everything will be counted on digital.
Because of the scanners on the paper ballots.
Yeah.
It'll be all
right, so,
because we're not going to be using these ballot marking devices.
Right,
even
exactly.
though in Charlotte, North Carolina, Mecklenburg County, their elections administrator said, "Oh, I hate ballots. I'd rather mail out a DRE." What insanity that is, huh?
Yeah.
You're in trouble when you have a guy like that.
Saying, if you win this lawsuit, and I'm sure it'll go federal. I mean, they're not going to relent. So, because what you're doing, John, in such an insidious way, is you're taking away the ability of the people who run the county election boards to steal the vote count.
Yeah,
it's an impunity buster.
Yeah,
that's what I call it.
And the other thing is too, John, even if we don't get a mandate from some higher authority court, what you've done is educated everybody so that a county that saves the ballot images is a cleaner county by far than the county that goes, we don't think we're going to do this. And a vendor that says, we don't need to put this in our system, we don't need to have you save them, and we're encouraging you not to, that will be a mark against that vendor anytime that vendor wants to do a damn thing in anybody else's election, although I know by now they have their hands pretty much in everything in the USA. But you have revealed it's an impunity buster. Now we can scarlet letter, EF,
exactly.
Election fraud.
Exactly.
Scarlet letter on their tie. I'm going to make ties. And
not a tough, transparency is the solution. That is our Einstein equation, okay? Boils down to, voting is a secret process. Counting is a public process, and we've lost our way, and we want our way back. We understand history. That's why we're taking down these crummy statues of people who, like Columbus, who was the first corporate raider to 100 million Americans that were living here before us. Yeah, there was 100 million. And they, hey, listen, democracy came from, from the tribes in the Ohio area, Kentucky. My lawyer, Bill Reisner, is part Indian, and he's very proud of how they taught Benny how to make a deal. Benjamin Franklin.
Ben Franklin was our guy.
Yeah.
And okay, so let's dissect the trifecta here. And Joel, I'll get you in a sec. We have a three-part. Since you're Catholic, Mary, Mimi, we'll call it the Trinity. Okay, so we have protecting the voter rolls and reversing the stripping of the voter rolls and registering new voters. And I think the number one challenge, or right up there in the top 5, is to get all these kids who marched in these marches to register to vote. And not just register to vote, but to join the trifecta effort to protect the election. So the registration rolls have to do with protecting them from more stripping, restoring people who have been stripped, making sure that people who think that they're registered know whether they are or not, because many are not because of the stripping, and then add particularly young people to the voter rolls. The second piece of the trifecta is vote by mail. That is complicated. There are a lot of really ins and outs to vote by mail. It is the way to go. Every registered voter in America should get a ballot in the mail. Why not? There should be no requirement, as there is in Alabama, which the U.S. Supreme Court has just horrendously upheld, where they're demanding either 2 witnesses or a notary. And you have to mail in a copy of your photo ID. It's ridiculous. It's completely designed to keep people from voting. And all across the country, with these gerrymandered legislatures, the legislatures are jumping in and demanding all sorts of hoops that people have to jump through to get a ballot. I mean, Ohio, and Bob, you've been working on this. You have to tell us the procedure for getting a vote by mail ballot in Ohio, Bob.
Well, in the primary, there really wasn't a procedure, even though there was only one place to vote in the county. you were on your own. You could go to the Kroger grocery store and ask the store. There literally wasn't a procedure, and the state was shut down. Now, in the fall,
Bob, you may be too close to your mic.
The Secretary of State, who wanted to send every registered, is this better? Can you hear it better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the other factor is now you'll have to apply. You'll get an application from the Secretary of State, which you'll have to fill out and make sure every line is correctly filled in. So you'll fill in the ballot request, the outside ballot. You'll send it off. That'll take 10 to 14 days in the mail. And then it'll come back and you'll have a ballot to fill out. And it'll take you another 10 to 14 days to mail that in. So you're going to have to fill out a request to get a ballot, even though you're a registered voter. And that's the primary way we're going to vote in Ohio.
It's so sick. Mary? Mimi?
Yeah, I have a question. Bob, is there a website yet that shows people how to fill out that application correctly? I mean, it could just be one page. This is a correctly filled out application. Name, address.
Yeah, they sent, I wish I would have had it down here, but they did send a little tiny card at the last second. If you can take a look, this card, which is virtually incomprehensible, told you to go to voteohio.gov. This is a new card. This is their new solution because nobody knew what to do in the fall. So Harvey knows this as well. LeBron James has been talking about getting involved and using Black associations and the churches in the Cleveland and Akron area. His notion is that if you leave it up to Frank LaRose, no one's going to know how to figure it out.
Right. So, and there are variations of that all over the country. We have extreme right-wing legislatures gerrymandered in Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, as you heard, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Texas, Arizona, Iowa. And, they're making it as hard as possible to get a ballot. Now, if we get through this election and we can get rid of the gerrymandered legislatures, we could emerge with a national vote by mail system that would be spectacular and that would really change the calculation in the country. The calculus.
If I could jump in here, is that
Joel,
just give you another.
Hey, Joel was first, John.
Okay, go ahead, Joel.
Yeah. The question I would raise is, it's called the what if scenario. What if we wake up after the election and there's been a few things have happened? One of them is that the absentee ballots were not counted and they were thrown in the trash can, just as they did in Ohio in 2004. And that's when I got to know Bob FITRAKIS. What if we have waiting lines 7 to 8 hours because people did not receive their absentee ballots, which is why a lot of people are waiting in line, by the way, according to Greg Palast, and they just decide to leave? What if Donald Trump and the $20 million that he's going to spend on voter suppression, that the 50,000 thugs that they're going to, put at polling places, many of them, according to the New York Times, may even be off-duty police officers, white nationalists, like where I live in North Carolina, they're all over the place, right? These are militia with their rebel flags. Yep. What if millions of votes aren't counted because we as progressives and as Democrats failed to cross-pollinate and come up with a way to fund Harvey's trifecta plan? And I don't want to do the what if because we got 4 months to mitigate that. The question I have to everyone on the panel, my distinguished friends and colleagues, is how do we prevent a what if scenario if the Democratic Party is bereft of any strategy whatsoever and the progressive voter suppression movement hasn't really aligned on a strategy? How do we deal with this?
Joel, it's the $64 trillion question. And I got to tell you that if Trump succeeds in stealing this election, you and I and everybody else on this call will have a nice dorm room at Dachau, which is where Hitler sent his political opponents, and they'll be spreading the virus all over the place. So the strategy, the overview and the strategy is simple. It's a 10-second overview. We have the election protection trifecta, protect the voter rolls, vote by mail, and guarantee the vote count. And it has to be put in place, but with each state having a coordinator who knows the law inside out. And then every county, every election board has to have active grassroots election protection people in there because this is a state by state and county by county election, not a national election. It will be decided in a few major counties and a few swing states. That's the strategy. And we got to get everybody. I know the PDA and Mimi and you are both involved with people demanding a progressive Democrats of America. Alan Minsky has already designated some state coordinators, and that's the way we got to go. Our state coordinator in Arizona is John, and then we'll talk to Mimi. So, John, you have your hand.
Well, the only thing I was going to add, is that vote by mail is a concern, okay? And there's two big concerns that I have. One, make it, when they mail you a ballot, okay, it should have a tracking device like an Amazon package. I mean, we need to try to get something like that because, vote by mail, they know how you're voting. I mean, that's something I learned that, how votes are counted. And a lot of times it's a machine that is verifying your signature. Okay, we discovered that in California. It's happening in Maricopa County that they don't check an original picture, a picture with an actual envelope wet signature. They're checking a picture with another picture, and this is happening in a lot of places. And I'm afraid that if we don't have a tracking system, you wrote the book, you and Bob, on the strip and flip. Well, I added to the story the stack. They're stacking. They know how to count with these Pitney Bowes and what they're capable of doing and verifying and sending another envelope back or not verifying that signature. It is something that we need to be very concerned about and insist to fight for that right there to make it happen. And that's what I wanted to add is that we're in deep doo-doo and we do need to wake people up. We need to get organized and we need to educate people and make a lot more election scrutineers.
Yes, and as Joel said, we've got less than 4 months. Mimi, I'll get you. And Mark has put on the screen here at BuzzFlash today, there's a piece. Mark, what is this piece real quick, and then I'll get Mimi.
It's from the Election Defense Alliance. It is, you can see.
And John BRAKEY and Audit USA.
The co-signers. I'm sorry, what did you say, John?
John BRAKEY.
Yes, from us too. It's written by Jonathan Simon, who is just a fabulous human being, very articulate, and understands on a national level what's going on, and an old friend.
So this is posted at BuzzFlash.
Yes, and it's an appeal to LeBron James to kind of join the effort in a coordinated way.
Well, he's already said he would. So, and Mimi, you were a point guard for LeBron when he was playing power forward, as I recall.
Yes, absolutely. All my life I've been training for this. The thing that I wanted to point out in the trifecta or the Trinity, the first two are, I put who can do something about it. And number one, about the registration and making sure people aren't purged. As you know, Steve Rosenfeld told me this, and I believe it, and I'm going to keep on confirming it. As of August 5th, 90 days before an election, it's federally a crime to purge your voter rolls. So if you check on August 6th, whether you're there on the voter rolls, if you're there, you take a screenshot because that's your registration, and it is a deterrent if everybody's doing that to disappearing you later. It's something we need train people to do and teach other people to do on either a computer or a phone or at the library, although COVID can't go. But the voter can do something about checking their registration. Plus the law. The law needs to be on top of it that they're not purging and criminalize or convict, indict if they are purging, and the political parties. Those three, voter, law, plus political parties. In the second instance, vote by mail. Again, the voter is the last line of defense there and kind of the first. We need to apply early for mail ballots once we know our registration is there and the address is correct. So this applied for mail ballot isn't going somewhere wrong. That's voter plus law. The law is trying to get us no excuse mail voting, open that up, plus parties. The goddamn parties, especially the Democrats, need to be on it. And the third, which is John, the count. That's the law and the parties. John is using the law very well in the courts, and the political parties, our party, the Democrats, should be on top of it. Now, speaking of making amends for history, would it not be lovely if Al Gore and John Kerry came before us? We got to say we're sorry. We did not fight. We know what.
Hillary Clinton, for God's sake.
Done it. I haven't seen the video on YouTube.
Bob?
Yeah. I want to be able to read, because we've got the solution in Ohio from the government. Make your own request form on a piece of paper. Write, quote, I'm a qualified elector and I'm requesting an absentee ballot. List your full name, date of birth, county, registration address, mailing address if different, Ohio driver's license number or last 4 digits of your social. Include a copy of acceptable form of ID. Indicate the type of ballot you would like. Sign and date your letter. Affix a stamp and mail to the Board of Election. They allowed you to make your own on a piece of paper.
Okay.
Well, of course, in Ohio, it has to be on hemp paper, but that's.
Well, that's great. Make it, take a picture of it so you know you sent it.
Recycle it.
So, because they wouldn't send everyone a ballot and they wouldn't send them an application.
No.
So the last thing was make your own.
Money. Well, that's a big part of it. Money. That always is. When you're trying to get a county to do something, counties are always impoverished. They say, we're making big salaries. The children all have to die in children's services. There's nothing for the jail. There's nothing for the sick people. There's nothing for the disabled. But, I'm making $200. We're paying, half the person's retired. We're paying $300,000 a year to somebody who retired 15 years ago, who jacked her salary up. Don't get me started about county budgets, but they are always going to plead money problems. And that's why I'm glad to hear that, because that puts it in the voters' lap. Okay, it's complicated and kind of weird, but we can help each other in Ohio do that now and take a picture of somebody's phone.
Yeah, absolutely, Mimi.
So nobody says you didn't fill it out right. You did fill it out.
We have a weird situation in Ohio where the Republican governor and the Republican Secretary of State are way to the left of the legislature. It's really amazing. Joel, did you have a hand? We're down to 4 minutes.
Well, I think what has to happen is, I'm not a big fan of the sips and bowls, task force, but I think there needs to be something similar to that, probably appointed by the Progressive Caucus and even Bernie Sanders, where they get the best and the brightest who understand these issues as well as everybody on this panel, and panels this task force to come up with A, what's the problem? B, what are the solutions? And do a big press conference and shock people, because we're going to have to shock people into the reality that A, our democracy is threatened and will be ad infinitum as long as, the 1965 Civil Rights Act has been gutted. And, and the question I would ask is, where it's too fragmented, this movement. How do we bring together the best and the brightest to wake people up and do a press conference?
Well, I think we'll talk about on Monday. We're going to have our COVID-19 emergency election protection Zoom call again at 5:00. Dr. Paul Zeitz will pull that together. You and I, Joel, are the co-conveners of that. And then in a couple of weeks, we'll have another national town hall, and we'll focus strictly on the organizing aspects. Now, I understand, and maybe you may know, that Alan Minsky has told me that we now have 6 or 7 state coordinators in the field through PDA. And Bob FITRAKIS is doing it in Ohio, BRAKEY in Arizona, you, Joel, in North Carolina. And the progressives have now taken over the Democratic Party caucus going into the Democratic National Convention. So, Joel, you're 100% right. But it's simple. It's a simple situation. We need a state coordinator in every state that people can go to who knows the law inside and out. And we need organizers in every county to win the trifecta. I'm challenging Michael Moore. Bob and I are putting out a piece to Michael Moore to take over in Michigan and Wisconsin with all his celebrity and his money. And we got to go state by state. This is not a complicated rocket science. We have three major issues in the trifecta. The registration rolls, vote by mail, and count the ballots. And we have two pieces of a strategy: state coordinators and activists in every county. And am I missing something? And vote in the stadiums.
Well,
is that it? Are we good with that?
And that's the kind of a program that LeBron James, I think, would fund, or Tom Steyer. But we have to go with a united front, a very high-level coalition. We could do this.
And we also have to go
soon. We got to do that by soon. August.
All right, we'll talk about it again on Monday.
Okay.
And then on our national call, and then Joel and I and the rest of us will put together a national event in a week or two. Thank you, Jesse, in New York, for doing the engineering. I love doing this by Zoom. I had my hair done and my nose powdered. Mark, keep up with BuzzFlash. John, keep up with your great lawsuit. Bob, say goodbye to Chris Columbus for me. And thank you, everybody. We'll be back again next week in Solartopia on the Green Power and Wellness Show at PRN. Always a joy to be able to see you all on this show. Take care, and we'll see you on Monday on the national call.